Billy Jonas wrote this song. He usually writes children's songs, and we snatched this from his one of his children's albums. I like the imagery and the fact that we are vessels for breath and for water, flowing, living water. We'll sing it in unison first, and then we'll do it in a round. We are hollow bamboo. Open up your heart and let the light shine through. We are hollow bamboo. Open up your heart and let the light shine through. Light shine through. Light shine through. Wrong key, sorry. We are hollow bamboo. Open up your heart and let the light shine through. We are hollow bamboo. Open up your heart and let the light shine through. Light shine through. Light shine through. We are hollow bamboo. Open up your heart and let the light shine through. We are hollow bamboo. Open up your heart and let the light shine through. Light shine through. Light shine through. We are hollow bamboo. Open up your heart and let the light shine through. We are hollow bamboo. Open up your heart and let the light shine through. We are hollow bamboo. Open up your heart and let the light shine through. We are hollow bamboo. Open up your heart and let the light shine through. Light shine through. Light shine through. We are light shine through. Open up your heart and let the light shine through. We are hollow bamboo. Open up your heart and let the light shine through. We are hollow bamboo. Open up your heart and let the light shine through. 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 We do this in two parts for those of you who aren't familiar with it. The lower voices start out, fill up my cup till it overflows. So you can hear us sing it and then pick a part and sing along. Fill up my cup till it overflows. Fill up my cup. Fill up my cup till it overflows. Fill up my cup. Fill up my cup till it overflows. Till it overflows with love. Fill up my cup. Fill up my cup till it overflows. Fill up my cup. Fill up my cup till
We can't hear you.
Folks, we're not performing. We're your backup to sing.
This is a really beautiful meditative chant, and most beautiful sung in three-part harmony, or in three parts. And so I think what we'll do is do each part that you can hear, and then you get to choose a part and sing along.
Listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you.
This is choice B.
Listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you.
And this is choice C. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. All right, you got that? Part A, part B, or part C?
Or mix
No, wait. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. Not
Peace is flowing like a river, flowing out of you and me, flowing out into the desert, setting all the captives free. Love is flowing like a river, flowing out of you and me, flowing out into the desert, setting all the captives free. Joy. I understand that this is a Sufi chant, and quite beautiful Sufi chant and wonderful meaning, and it's beautiful sung either in unison or in a round. We'll do both. If you know it, start it out with us. As you learn it, please join us. I am opening up in sweet surrender to the luminous love light of the world. I am opening up in sweet surrender to the luminous love light of the world. I am opening, I am opening, I am opening, I am opening, I am opening up in sweet surrender to the luminous love light of the world. I am opening up in sweet surrender to the luminous love light of the world. I am opening, I am opening, I am opening, I am opening, I am opening up in sweet surrender to the luminous love light of the world. I am opening up in sweet surrender to the luminous love light of the world. I am opening up in sweet surrender to the luminous love light of the world. I am opening up in sweet surrender to the luminous love light of the world. I am opening, I am opening, I am opening,
our last one.
Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you.
Good evening, friends. Redheads, yes. Woo for redheads.
Ginger's in the house.
I am Jonathan Snipes, and this is Ingrid Lakey. And we're here to let you know that music is a part of tonight's presentation. And so both before Eileen Flanagan's presentation, which will also include music, we're going to do some singing together. Ingrid and I are both part of Earth Quaker Action Team, Equate. We have other Equate friends here. And we had a wonderful afternoon in Pittsburgh, letting PNC Bank know what Quakers think about mountaintop removal. And so we want to share some of that energy with you. Music has been an important part of our Equate activism, and we would like to share that with you.
And we want you to sing along.
Oh, yes, we want you. That's the whole point, is audience participation. So we are going to start with a few songs, and then we'll move to Eileen's presentation, and there'll be some music throughout. So we're going to begin with One Friend's Hands, which you can see projected behind you. One friend's hands
Can't tear a prison down. Two friends' hands can't tear a prison down. But if 2 and 2 and 50 make a million, we'll see that day come round. We'll see that day come round. One friend's eyes can't see the future clear. One friend's eyes can't see the future clear. But if 2 and 2 and 50 make a million, we'll see that day come round. We'll see that day come round. One friend's voice can't shout to make them hear. One friend's voices can't shout to make them hear. But if 2 and 2 and 50 make a million, we'll see that day come round. We'll see that day come around. One friend's strength
can't stop extreme extraction.
We changed the words. Heart can't turn the world to love. But if 2 and 2 and 50 make a million, we'll see that day come round. We'll see that day come around. Oh.
Voila.
Love it when technology
Wonders
works.
Of technology. So this is a great song for energy and uplift, and we've used this a lot in our nonviolent actions, including today. Woke up this morning with my mind
stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
justice.
Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on justice. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on justice. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on justice. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
Mountains. I
Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on mountains. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on mountains. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on mountains. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
Let's try to clap. Get some clapping.
Woke up this morning with my mind. Water. Stayed on water. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on water. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on water. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Rivers. Oh, freedom? Freedom. Stay on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. So, Andy. One of the fun things about doing nonviolent direct action is you learn to roll with what comes, and that means changing words and bringing in people with additional skills.
Guest artists.
Guest artists. Andy Doan, who was my 5th and 6th grade teacher.
This is my official favorite ever student.
Can you change that?
Huh?
Did you change it? Oh, you did?
Sorry.
Oh, good.
If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer out warning, I'd hammer out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Ooh, if I had a bell, I'd ring it in the morning, I'd ring it in the evening, all over this land. I'd ring out danger, I'd ring out warning, I'd ring out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Ooh, if I had a song, I'd sing it in the morning, I'd sing it in the evening, all over this land. I'd sing out danger, I'd sing out warning, I'd sing out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Ooh. Well, I have a hammer, and I've got a bell, and I've got a song to sing all over this land. It's a hammer of justice, it's a bell of freedom, it's a song about love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Ooh, it's a hammer of justice, it's a bell of freedom, it's a song about love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Whoa, Feels so appropriate to bring Pete Seeger into the space. So it's my honor to introduce Eileen Flanagan. We met several years ago at a Pendle Hill workshop on white people confronting racism. That's several years ago now. Whew. Over the years, I've known Eileen as a spiritual teacher and as a writer, as an elder. Her last book was on the Serenity Prayer called The Wisdom to Know the Difference, and it was endorsed by the Dalai Lama. And it is, in fact, available in the bookstore. Yeah, I know. It's surprising, but check it out. She has a new book that she's working on called Renewable, and it's on the midlife crisis that led her to eco-justice work, and that'll be out in March, and she has been working really, really hard on that. But I really got to know Eileen when she joined Earth Quaker Action Team 2.5 years ago, and that's, in fact, when I fell in love with Eileen Flanagan. Yeah. Eileen came in at an interesting time in Equate's life, and she just threw herself into it. It was definitely two pieces meeting each other where they needed to be. Eileen brings an attention to detail as well as a sense of the whole, the big picture, and what's coming down the pike, which is wonderful in a campaign. She's really able to think about all the little pieces that need to be done to make sure we can get to our goal of winning, to make sure that we will be faithful to our mission, and that we will be faithful to friends and to our own calling. One of the other things I've appreciated about working with Eileen is she's also a parent. And I'm a parent of a small child, and she's a parent of increasingly less small children. They're both in high school now. But how she attends to the part of me that, not just the activist part of me, but the mom part of me, and the woman part of me, and the part of me that strives to figure out how to take care of myself, as she is working on figuring out what that balance is too. And ultimately, what I love most about Eileen is that she is striving to live sustainably and faithfully into a vision that she has, that she's going to share with us tonight. Eileen will speak out of the silence.
Thank you, friends. Thank you, Ingrid and Jonathan. I'm going to begin this evening by reading the first few sentences of the statement that was drafted at the World Gathering of Friends in Kenya in 2012. The statement that they approved about peace and eco-justice. And I'm going to take this as my starting point. In past times, God's creation restored itself. Now, humanity dominates, our growing population consuming more resources than nature can replace. We must change. We must become careful stewards of all life. Earth Care unites traditional Quaker testimonies: peace, equality, simplicity, love, integrity, and justice. It may be that there are some friends who still need convincing, but my experience of this week tells me that many more of us already believe this statement, and our hunger is to know how to do it. Our hunger is to give up our despair and to give up the ways we've always done things that don't always work and figure out new ways, because we do indeed need to change. And so I'm going to speak this evening about my own calling to economic justice work, but it is not going to be one long advertisement for Earth Quaker Action Team. Walter Jelt Sullivan's going to do that tomorrow at 1:30 in Morgan. Instead, I'm going to look for the ways that I think my calling intersects with the other callings that I'm aware of in this room, at least a few of them. And I'm going to look for lessons from my experience with Equate that I think might serve other friends, regardless of their focus. As Ingrid mentioned, I'm a parent. I have a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old. And I've known for quite some time that global warming or climate change is going to affect them. I've known it up here, but it didn't really kick me in the gut until 2.5 years ago, when I got a call from an old friend in Botswana, where I had served in the Peace Corps in the 1980s. My friend's name is Madi Tupelo, and don't worry, there's not a spelling quiz at the end. Her name means Mother of Prayers. And she had just called to say hello, and knowing that winter here is summer there, I said, "Is it hot?" And she said, "Oh my God, it's 45 degrees. You could tell who knows Celsius. That's 113. And something about that moment made global warming real for me. I got off the phone and I started Googling. And I learned that in Botswana, when the rain falls, sometimes it's so hot it can't be absorbed into the soil. I learned that higher temperatures keep the rain in the clouds longer, so that the rains often come late. And when they do, they're torrential. And it was after that call and that little bit of reading that I showed up for my first meeting of Earth Quaker Action Team. Now, I'm the only one in Equate who talks about Africa all the time. But I'm clear that that is part of my leading around this. And so I was emboldened by my work with Equate, in part to go back to Southern Africa for my 50th birthday. And because there's a large carbon cost to that flight, and frankly also so I could write it off my taxes, I decided to write some articles about climate change in Africa. So I did more research. I read about Lake Chad, which used to be the size of Lake Erie, and now it's shrunk to a small fraction of the size. I read about Lake Turkana, which used to stretch from Kenya into Ethiopia, but because of global warming, It's shrunk so much it doesn't cross the border anymore. I read that 37% of the people who live in the Lake Turkana area are already malnourished. And I understood why friends in Kenya would connect the peace testimony with eco-justice, because they, like the CIA and the Pentagon, have figured out that resource wars are going to be an issue, are already an issue. And the most mind-boggling thing I read was a statistic from a UN agency, from a study in 2007, that predicted that in the 21st century, in sub-Saharan Africa alone, 180 million people would die as a result of climate change. 180 million? I can see a few steps down the road. I can't imagine that. But that statistic stayed on my heart. As I prepared for my trip, I ran into an acquaintance and mentioned that I was excited to be going back to Botswana and happy to see my best friend from my village. And she said, "Oh, does she still live there?" And I said, "Yes, she lives there. She's from there." And it took this very nice white woman just a little too long to understand that my best friend in Africa was African. I want to linger on this story for a moment, friends, because I think it's one of the places that our leadings intersect. There are many people here this week who have been giving workshops and showing films and fostering discussions about racism. And for me, it connects to the speaker's Monday night. Victoria Green named her organization Every Murder is Real, because we live in a society that doesn't see it that way. Noah Baker Merrill talked about the tree of life and the other plants that compete with the tree of life. And so I want to name this tree, or this plant, of stereotypes. And specifically, I want to share a term that I think some friends know, but some friends don't. And the term is implicit bias. Just nod your head if you've heard of that before. I'm curious. Okay. Implicit bias is the gap between what we think we believe and the unconscious beliefs that inhibit our acting with love. I think it's summed up perfectly in the title, also available in the bookstore, I'm sure, Fit for Freedom, Not for Friendship. Right? That's what it is. What we think we believe and the unconscious ways we've been conditioned are in conflict. And they're unconscious, so we don't realize it. And so although you could give a whole talk just on this, I just want to name that work of addressing and trying to bring to light unconscious biases as something that, for me, connects to my work on climate change, even though it might not be obvious to other people all the time. Because if that acquaintance can't imagine that my best friend in Africa is African, how is she going to be concerned about 180 million people? It reminds me of the other message on Monday night in meeting, where a woman said that her mother was afraid of the neighborhood where she lived. Do you remember? And the mother said, "I don't have eyes to see your neighborhood." So this work of recognizing what we don't see feels really important to me in terms of liberating us and other people and following love's motion, the theme of the conference. In fact, the studies on implicit bias show that that's exactly how it works. It slows down our cognition. There's great research on how it works. It literally is about slowing down our processing. Sue Penn encouraged us to ask hard questions, so I want to just name one. I've heard African Americans occasionally say, "Why do white Americans need to go to Africa to discover black people?" Right? And I just want to lift up that question and say, that's a good question. And I'll accept anyone into the struggle for social justice through whatever door they come, and this is the door I came through, was living in Southern Africa in the 1980s. And because of that, I have a particular pet peeve about stereotypes of Africa. Who's seen this movie? Every parent, oh yes, The Lion King. Did you notice that on books about Africa, the sun is always setting? What is up with that? Of course, it's hard to imagine that people are already dying from climate change in this environment, right? Even in my children's Quaker school, one time I was asked to come speak to a pre-K class. The teacher had a wonderful book on Africa. It was full of pictures of cities and villages, of people in suits, and people with bare feet, and people who were light and people who were dark. And the teacher opened the book and propped it up to the picture of the lion. The other image that I encounter most often is the image of violence. And there was a picture that I almost put up and decided not to because I don't want to give it extra room in your minds. But it was a picture from the film Blood Diamond of a man with a machete. This is Madita Pello in 2012. She lives in a diamond mining town which issued her this nice house because she has 2 kids. Botswana actually does a very good job of using their diamond resources to support families and communities. But when I told people I was going to a diamond mining town, they thought I was going to the movie Blood Diamond. One of the exciting things about the field of implicit bias is that researchers are learning a lot about what we can do to undo it. There are actually things we can do, and one of them is exposing ourselves to different images. And so when I talk about climate change in Africa, I like to show pictures of Madita Pello and her daughter Seho, and her son Mopati, who's a musician studying in Zimbabwe. I like to show my old school where they now run out of water 4 or 5 days at a time. But the new headmistress has gotten funds to purchase giant cisterns to collect the rain when they get it. Another stereotype of Africans is that they're helpless victims waiting for us to save them, and that is not my point. People in Africa are dealing with climate change now. They're mostly way ahead of us in terms of figuring out ways to adapt. The problem is that our country consumes a lot more, that we emit a lot more carbon, and our government plays a destructive role on the global stage in terms of making the kinds of changes that we need to change. And that's why Africans need us to act here. And so I like to show pictures of the women I met in Johannesburg who work for Greenpeace Africa. On your right, Fiona Musana is from Uganda, and on the left, Mbong Akeley is South African. There's Mbong again, and Melita Steele, also a South African. I know a few of us started our social activism, Amanda, back in the 80s around issues in South Africa. Who could have imagined 25 years ago, white and black people, and this is a very diverse staff that they have, working together to protect their water? But of course it makes sense. South Africa is very vulnerable to water shortages, particularly because 150 years of mining has polluted so much water. And now Shell wants to frack in the Karoo Desert, which is a very fragile, dry region. And so the Afrikaner farmers, a few of them, sent delegates to Pennsylvania and New York. They watched the movie Gaslands, and it alarmed them, understandably. So they came to Pennsylvania and New York, and they came back to South Africa and said, "We do not want fracking here." I came across a video of these Afrikaner farmers in a multiracial, multilingual, multi-generational rally with the Landless Peoples Movement. Now, if you know anything about South African history, you know that the landless people are landless because the Afrikaners stole their land. And yet they all drink the same water. And this is where I'm finding my hope, friends. I keep hearing little stories like this from around the world. In Alberta, it was the Indigenous people, the First Nations people, who really led the movement against the extraction of tar sands oil. There are many groups opposing the Keystone Pipeline that is scheduled to ship that oil across the United States for export from the Gulf. But one of the groups is the Cowboy and Indian Alliance. Now, I don't want to sugarcoat this. I'm going to guess there's a lot of implicit bias. There's a lot of struggle in those coalitions. I'm just going to guess. And yet it gives me tremendous hope. And I got in touch with this a few weeks ago when the Friends Council on Higher Education and the Friends Council on Education was having their opening evening of a weekend workshop or weekend conference. And Tribe One performed. Now, if you don't know Tribe One, they are a terrific multiracial singing group which just happens to include the two singers who started us tonight. But their founder, Nionu Span, challenged us to think about our vision. And just to give you a heads up, I'm going to do the same to you in just a minute. She challenged us to try to name our vision for living in right relationship. And I thought of these stories, and what came to me especially afterward, the words crystallized. That my vision is not that we save the earth. My vision is that the earth is saving us from our illusion of separation. It's not that we need to save the earth. The earth will survive even if we don't. But the crisis of the planet seems to me one of our best hopes for healing our illusion of separation. So, I'm going to ask you to do what Wade asked on Sunday evening, which is to do a very brief sharing with a neighbor. Now, I want to acknowledge that we Quakers don't talk a lot about vision, so this might be hard. Maybe you need to word it another way. What are you yearning for? What is your greatest hope for how we could live together on this planet? And you only get a minute. Find one neighbor, decide who's going to speak first. They were supposed to warn you that I might do this. It's okay. Find one friend. Yeah, I'm going to time you. It's 1 minute each. Does everybody have a partner? All right, first person, go. All right, person one, if you haven't stopped already, switch. And person two, share your vision. Let's wait 20 more seconds.
I am looking for my voice. I am looking for my voice. I am looking for my voice. Can you feel it? Can you taste it? Do you hear it? I am looking for truth. I am looking for truth. I am looking for truth. Can you feel it? Can you taste it? Will you be it? I am looking for vision. I am looking for vision. I am looking for vision. Can you feel it? Can you taste it? Do you see it?
I believe that this room is full of visions. They might not all be the same, or we might word them differently. But I also have this sense that they're connected and part of a larger whole, even when we can't see the connections. And so whatever our vision, the hard question I want to pose is what helps us to be bold. I believe the world needs us to follow our callings boldly. If we have any hope of making the changes that are suggested in the 2012 vision of friends from around the world of different theological bents. And so I'm going to share a few things that I'm learning about that through my work with Equate. One thing that helps us to be bold is to have a focus. I've done a lot of activism in my life that involved jumping from one thing to the next, or rushing from one meeting to the next. And in hindsight, that did not encourage my boldness. Neither did serving on too many committees. It's been suggested to me that I should explain how Equate's campaign fits into a bigger struggle. And I would give the analogy of the civil rights movement, where some people focused on desegregating the buses in Montgomery, and some folks focused on desegregating the lunch counters in Greensboro. Some people were working on voter registration or the schools in Little Rock, and yet they were part of a movement. And the history of nonviolent direct action shows that that is actually what works. It's not everybody trying to do everything at once. And so Earth Quaker Action Team picked one issue as our major campaign. And you may have heard this week that some of us were working on that, getting PNC Bank to stop its financing of mountaintop removal coal mining. Mountaintop removal is known as extreme extraction. As humanity, started running out of the easy-to-get-to fossil fuels. Instead of choosing to invest in renewables, the fossil fuel companies came up with more extreme ways of getting fuel. So for coal, they're blowing up the tops of mountains. For natural gas, the extreme extraction technique is called fracking, which many people have been hearing about, where they inject a very toxic brew deep into the earth to push up the gas. The tar sands oil that I mentioned earlier is a form of extreme oil extraction. In all of these cases, the communities who live near those fuel sources have incredible health effects as a result. High rates of cancer, poisoned water, all sorts of things. And the overall problem of extreme extraction contributes to climate change greatly, both in the destruction of forests that were holding carbon and that sort of thing, releasing methane through fracking, but also by keeping us hooked on fossil fuels. So this is just a picture of one of our actions. And I love this picture because you can actually see who we are, where we are, and what we're doing. This picture is a little funnier. One of the top executives of PNC in Philadelphia was receiving the William Penn Award. And it just happened that one of our members was friends with the William Penn impersonator. So a few folks went down to the gala, and William Penn objected to his good Quaker name being besmirched in this way. I share this partly to show that not everything we do is civil disobedience, which is apparently a rumor that has been going around. But also because this week I've been thinking a lot about our Quaker heritage. I think one thing that helps inspire boldness is role models. And we've got Bayard Rustin, who organized, among other things, the 1963 March on Washington, when many people didn't believe he could pull it off. We've got Alice Paul, the suffrage leader, who committed civil disobedience even during World War I, when people said that patriotism should trump women's rights. We've got abolitionists. We've got all kinds of role models going all the way back to the beginning. This week I ran into historian Doug Gwen outside the Convocation Center. And I said, Doug, help me fact-check my talk for Thursday. Is it true that there were thousands of Quakers put in jail in 17th century England? And he said, oh, yes. Is it true that hundreds of them died? And he said, oh, yes, more than 400. And they received terrible fines, really high, exorbitant fines. He told me that worshiping in groups of 5 or more was actually illegal during the period of persecution. And so I asked, well, did Quakers worship in groups of 4? Jesus said you only need 2 or 3. And he said, no, they intentionally flouted what they knew was an unjust law. That's how they ended up in prison and with such high fines. what struck me as I thought about that is that our faith, our religious community, was founded in incredibly turbulent times. And some of these quirky practices that we have of eldership and accompanyship and committees really grew out of that history of struggle. And I believe that that actually makes us well suited for these times. Or at least we have some practices to draw on. And so I want to give a few illustrations. This is a picture of the tar sands. One of our members of Equate, a little over a year ago, had just graduated from Bryn Mawr College. And she announced at the end of a meeting, Lena Blunt announced at the end of a meeting that she was going to be gone for the summer because she was going on first a healing walk that was organized by the First Nations people who live near the tar sands. And then a compassionate earth walk led by a Buddhist monk that was to trace the path of the Keystone Pipeline, the northern leg, from Alberta down. And Lena wasn't going to have the time to walk the whole entire thing. She would just be walking 300 miles or so. And she said at the end of this meeting, I feel like I need something in the way of spiritual nurture or grounding, and I don't know what it is that I need. And I went over to her at the end of the meeting and I said, you need a support committee. And she said, great, what is that? And I explained, and I'll explain it again because not all friends may know, that we have clearness committees when people are trying to make a decision. But when you've made a decision and you're going to do something difficult, it can be very helpful to have a few people gather in support. This was not official. This was not under the care of any meeting. But a few of us sat on Carolyn McCoy's back porch, and we listened to Lena, and we worshiped with her, and we promised to hold her in the light as she made this journey. And at some point it occurred to me, would it be meaningful to connect with Quakers along the way? She said, that's great. So I found Quaker Finder, and I found the map of the Keystone Pipeline, and I discovered that Montana is really big. And the closest place there were any Quakers was Billings Meeting, a 3-hour drive from Lena's walk route. But I called them up. My Irish Catholic mother would never in a million years think of calling Catholics on the other side of the country to ask them to pray for someone they didn't even know who wasn't even a Catholic, right? But this is actually not crazy in our tradition. So the 3 members of Billings Meeting prayed for Lena. And in our meeting in Philadelphia, we sang this song for her.
Step by step, the longest march can be won, can be won. Many stones can form an arch, singly none, singly none. And by union what we will shall be accomplished still. Drops of water turn the mill. Singly none, singly none.
If I have a thesis here, I think that's it. Drops of water together can turn what one drop can't. One of the Friends practices that's been very meaningful for Equate is our worship. We found that it's pretty inviting to college students, to people of other faiths, to people who aren't sure what they believe. And there's something very grounding about it. And in nonviolent direct action, it can be very powerful, a way to take up space and claim authority without yelling. This was an action last October where there were 7 people committing civil disobedience. And down the street, there were at least 75 anti-fracking activists who were chanting and really loud. And the police let them stay there all day. Their loudness was not actually that disturbing. But these friends who worshiped and spoke out of the silence and drew in the police and drew in the passing crowd and sang to fill up the volume of this building, the police did not know what to do with them. And they were arrested while the chanters were not. My own experience of this came last March. Even though we have a focused campaign, we have wanted to stay connected to the national movement, particularly against extreme extraction. And our connection point has been around the Keystone XL pipeline. And many of you may be familiar with the Pledge of Resistance or have signed it. Almost 100,000 people have, saying that they're prepared to commit civil disobedience if President Obama approves that northern end of the pipeline that crosses the border into Canada, which is why the State Department has a stake in it. So the National Climate Movement actually asked us to go ahead and organize one of these actions to show that those people who signed that pledge did not just accidentally click something on the internet, they really meant it. And so we organized this action that had about 200 people. And because the State Department is inside the Philadelphia Federal Building, we were blocking the doors. And we were singing, and the police came, and they gave us 3 warnings, as they do. And they started arresting people. And we sang, "Woke up this morning with my mind, stayed on freedom," all afternoon. And at a certain point, I turned to Lena, who was the song leader, and we were both getting hoarse. And I remembered that previous action where Michael Gagne had called for worship. And I said, "Let's call for some silence." And she said, "Great, you do it." And I hadn't been there when Michael did it. I just heard it was really powerful. So I wasn't sure what he had said. So I just winged it, which is exactly what we do in worship, right? It's perfect preparation for nonviolent direct action. You don't know what's going to happen next. So I asked the crowd to join us, and I explained that some of us were Quakers. And I tried to make it inviting for the other people of faith, because there were many. And I tried to make it inviting for the people who might not have a faith. And I said that we were there not just for our own children, but that we were also praying for the children of the police and the children of the TransCanada executives who wanted to build this pipeline that was so short-sighted. And when we fell into worship, I closed my eyes, and all I could hear was the shudder of the cameras across the police barrier. And I was told later that the policeman in the foreground bowed his head, and that another policeman walked over and turned off the police radio. And I was told from someone in the back of the crowd who couldn't hear me speak that they didn't know what was happening, but they could feel the wave of silence take over the group. And the crowd of 200 settled into worship. I've heard wildly different estimates of how many minutes that lasted. But Lena closed worship at just the right moment. She started singing that old spiritual, Guide My Feet. And Matthew Armstead, our coordinator, whispered from across the barrier, "Start walking in a circle." And so we held hands and we sang Guide My Feet as we walked within the police barricade. And it was clear that we were nonviolent, that we were loving, that we were prayerful. And it was also clear that the police did not own us. They were not in control anymore. So they started arresting us again. And down in the jail cell that day, there were 17 women. And half of us, it's an odd number, so if you count Lena as half a Quaker, we were half Quaker. I was so proud. And it wasn't just people from Earth Quaker Action Team. There were women there from the PYM Eco-Justice Working Group, who we had never taken action with before. And one of the other women, a Jewish woman in the cell, said, "I have a song that I want to teach you."
Courage, dear friends, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home.
And I said, you know, right before we came, I got an email from Ann Yasuhara from Princeton Meeting. And she said, "I'll be holding you all in the light today. I wish I could be there, but I just got diagnosed with cancer." And so I asked the group if we could sing the song for Anne.
Courage, Anne, you do not walk walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home.
Ann Yasuhara's memorial is this Saturday. And some of us will be speeding out of here early in the morning to make it at Princeton meeting. After we sang to Anne, we just started going around the circle and singing to every woman in the room. There was no one who knew everyone's name at the beginning, but there was no one who wasn't known by someone. And so we would call out the name of the next woman in line. And when we got around the circle, we started singing to the men who were just a little ways down the block. And they started calling out their names. And when we finished with the men, we asked the guards their names, and we started singing to them, which some of the non-Quaker activists found very strange. But one of them, who had come in with a real kind of hard attitude, she came from an activist background where hating the police was the way you did it. Afterwards, on Facebook, she posted that if you're ever going to get arrested, you should do it with Quakers. By the way, I don't know if Barry Krosno is in the audience tonight, but it does seem to me that if you look at our history, the times when we've been growing and vibrant, as he articulated a vision the other night, have been the times when we've been edgiest. There's something about how I'm learning to do activism now that's really different than the activism I had experienced before. It has to do with prayer. It has to do with singing. It has to do with believing that the Spirit is moving among us. This picture was from my first experience of civil disobedience, which was with a secular group. It was again with the campaign against the Keystone Pipeline. It was actually the politest civil disobedience anyone's ever done. It was highly orchestrated for the Sierra Club and other big groups that don't normally participate in that sort of thing. So it was pleasant, actually. But there was no singing. But I brought support people because I'm a Quaker, and I know that you don't go do something risky without bringing your friends. So this was my Quaker piece of that, my two support people who greeted me when I left. I have one last story, and it's a story of intersecting leadings. And I guess the way I want to start it is by saying that I feel certain that there's much work done in our community that is nurturing what's happening for me right now. The people who taught me about support committees, the people who encouraged me to try to pray more deeply, the people doing all kinds of work to build up the body, that work is connected to our social justice work. We don't need to think of it as a separate thing. And so this story starts with Laura Melly, who's one of the co-clerks of this year's gathering and also a member of my meeting. And so I know that Laura's vision for Friends, in part at least, has to do with helping us connect across our different organizations and across geography. And so last summer, after last year's gathering, Laura got in touch with me and said, Eileen, you know, next year's gathering is near Pittsburgh, PNC's headquarters. I'm sure Equate is planning something. And I said, oh yeah, I guess. And she said, well, I think that you should start now to reach out to the friends in Southeastern Yearly Meeting because something is really going on there. There are these youth from Florida who are so excited about social action. And she told me about the action at last year's gathering, which I had missed. You really need to get in touch with the people in Florida. I had a few things a little higher on my to-do list, but because Laura Melly told me to, I did. And so we had some exchanges. I learned about a young friend in Tampa who had actually gotten a minute of religious service from her meeting, a formal process, or from her yearly meeting, for people to support her leading to work with us on mountaintop removal coal mining. And we said, that's great. We're not quite sure how to connect with teenagers in Florida. But it prompted us to connect with some young people in Philadelphia yearly meeting, and that had actually never occurred to us, to do an action with our own middle schoolers. But we kept the emails going so that there was a little bit of connection when something kind of miraculous happened. Now last year, last April in 2013, we attended the PNC shareholders meeting. We decided to hold, we had been going for a few years. We had been pretty polite, we thought, in asking them to stop this practice of lending to mountaintop removal companies. And this year we decided to challenge them more directly and to hold our own worship and our own business meeting within their shareholders meeting. And so friends stood up and challenged the board and sang the old Union song, "Which Side Are You On?" And those friends were actually prepared to risk arrest that day if it was necessary. Nobody ever really wants to get arrested, but there are certain moments when we decide that it's strategic. And that was one where we said we're prepared in this instance to do that. But PNC knew that they would probably get more bad press, and they did not want to arrest us. And so they shut their own meeting down in 17 minutes. This is 2013. 2014, we weren't even going to go to the shareholders meeting because we didn't think we could top 17 minutes. And we don't ever want to do anything that looks like a letdown from last time until we heard that PNC moved their shareholders meeting to Tampa. The only place in the country where there was a group of friends ready and excited to do something with us. Go figure. Plus, a national organization, some of us, offered money for a few of us to fly down. from Philadelphia. Now, I know it would have been better if we had ridden our bikes. We didn't have time. So Matthew and Hannah went down because guess what else? Southeastern Yearly Meetings, annual sessions, was the weekend before the shareholders meeting. So they were all together. They did a multi-generational training in nonviolent direct action. And the young people made all these beautiful signs. Some of them convinced their parents to let them take off from school to be part of the action, and some of them didn't. But they were all there in spirit. And so we struggled to discern, well, what are we meant to do this year? We did not feel called to risk arrest in Florida, where we would have very little support in terms of legal help, in terms of flexibility to be able to stay or come back for a court hearing. So we decided we did not want to do anything that would get us arrested. And it turns out that PNC picked a state where it's illegal to interrupt a meeting. It's also illegal to hold up a sign in Florida. There were many indications that they were thinking of us when they made this choice. In their shareholder materials, there was a long, long list of rules that we had never seen before. They announced that there were no photographs and that they would be checking phones and smartphones and handbags. There was a long list of everything they could think that they might make you check at the door. So we thought, what can we do just to let them know we're here? That's all. And so we made these T-shirts. And the plan was that we would wear business attire and jackets over our T-shirts, and that several of us who had proxies to get into the shareholders meeting would go in and at some moment stand up and take off our jackets. And that everyone else would stay out in front of the shareholders meeting and street speak and sing. Hannah Jeffrey was going to read a statement during the question and answer period where shareholders get to make statements, usually. And Matthew was our police liaison, which means that while the rest of us were praying, we would have someone speaking to security so that we could stay centered in prayer, which I had argued all along was really important. I said, this isn't a skit. We can't just pretend that we're praying for PNC to act responsibly. We have to actually do it. In the end, because of a technicality, PNC excluded every person meant to go into the shareholders meeting except for me. I had the shares from Jonathan's meeting, which were purchased a different way. And so I went in my little business jacket and looked around at all these people in suits. And I looked at the door, hoping that Matthew was going to get in too, because he thought he might. And I looked at the agenda, and I realized that they were flying through their agenda. And that they might actually beat last year's record for us, which they did. I knew that I was meant to stand up, but I wasn't sure how to interact with security and still stay in prayer. So I was trying to discern when. This thing looks like it's going pretty fast. And so I waited for the shareholders' resolution that Friends Fiduciary had joined in, along with Boston Commons and other organizations, asking the bank to count the carbon cost of their investments when they consider investments. And when they announced that they rejected that proposal, I stood up and I took off my jacket and I closed my eyes. And it seemed like almost immediately afterward, Bill Demchek shut the meeting down without the Q&A period, without anyone reading a statement or asking any questions, in 15 minutes. They had gotten through the business they were legally required to do. And so I wasn't sure if I had failed. Should I have stood up earlier? So I just stayed there with my eyes closed. I could feel the head of security, who we reunited with today, standing right behind me. Now, even though I wrote a book on the Serenity Prayer, I actually don't think I'm very good at praying. So I tried to think, what can help me actually stay centered in prayer? As everyone was leaving the meeting, and I wasn't sure if anyone was watching me or not, but the first person who came to mind was Dustin White, one of our allies in Appalachia, who had taken a few hours out of his day to drive me to this site in West Virginia that was so eerie because the birds were gone. And I thought of the friends who I knew were right outside the door, Matthew and Hannah and these friends from Florida, Ann Sundberg, Kate, Elise. And when I came out, I saw, in fact, that they were all in worship too. That when they realized they were not going to get in, they took off their jackets and stood there as people came out. But in that room, I knew that I was not alone, that way had opened for us to be there, that I was connected to Dustin and the mountains, to these friends, to the friends further outside, to the friends in Philadelphia holding us in the light, to the Greenpeace Africa friends working on similar issues in their own country. At the debrief afterward at Panera, there were two things that the Florida friends were particularly excited about. One was that their group had been so multi-generational. In fact, Christy Duncan Tesmer, a member of our meeting and the new General Secretary of Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, has been talking for years about the power of multi-generational community. And I don't think I actually really got it until Florida. The other thing they said was that they had never done anything together before. Friends from Miami never do anything with friends from Tampa or St. Petersburg. This was fun. Let's do it again. It was those young people from Florida who really helped make today happen. as many of you probably know, we had, I think, 175, 200 people at the action, most of whom came from the gathering. I think we ranged in age from 4 to 84, from all over. And this is a group of the high schoolers having worship in one of the PNC corporate offices downtown. This is the 200. And this is my final metaphor. The theme of this conference is, what is it? Let love be the first motion. Let love be the first motion. And as I've said, I assume that the Spirit is moving us not all in the same direction all the time. That we have our individual motions, but that doesn't mean we can't pay attention to how those motions work together, as in modern dance. So as we look at the big picture and see how we're connected, and see how Spirit is moving among us as individuals, and see how we can work together, I believe strongly that that is part of what it will enable us to be as bold as these times require. It's my encouragement of you. Follow those leadings, whatever they are. Do it boldly. Find a team. I am part of a team now in a way that I have never experienced before, and it is really great. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, friends. It's not quite over yet. We get to have a bit of time for some worship sharing, and then we'll end with a couple more songs. So if you're sort of starting to plan your exit, if you can stay here for a bit longer, let's sit with Eileen's messages and really her challenge around what does it take for you to be bold, or what supports you to be bold? That is our query for this worship sharing time. What supports you to be bold in pursuing your vision? Please stand if you have a message, and a microphone will be brought to you.
About about 6 months before the invasion in Iraq, I really felt I needed to do something. And I went to my Quaker meeting, Inland Valley Friends meeting in Southern California, and I said, I need to do something. I know the invasion is coming. I know, but we have to stand up and say no. I said, I feel the need to stand on the street corner in Redlands, California with a plaque and say no to war. I said, I would like some support. And a number of them said, you know, yeah, okay. And one of them said, I'll be glad to do it. And I said, when can you do it? He said, well, Wednesday and Friday between 4:30 and 6. So I said, then we'll do it Wednesday for Friday from 4:30 to 6. The first day I go there with a bunch of signs, and there's about 6 Quakers there. We held up signs. We had called the old Redlands Peace Group that used to picket against nuclear armaments. A couple of old gentlemen came that first day. The next day, the Friday, I got there at 4:30 and I was the only one there. And I was scared to death that I wouldn't follow through. But I said, I'll do it. And I stepped up, I picked up a sign, I held it up, and right across the street were these 2 old gentlemen, one a World War II veteran, and one a Korean War veteran from the Redlands Peace Group. On the day that we heard of the day of the invasion, all 4 corners of Redlands, the main drag in Redlands, were filled with peace demonstration. Every week it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that Redlands Peace Group is still there every Friday afternoon. And it wasn't my courage that started it. It was the courage of the people in the Friends meeting to support my leading. And I think that's what the speaker was talking about, is that if you have a leading, no matter how timid you feel, ask for help.
Friends, I am grateful for Eileen's message to us. She has shared with us very moving and powerful stories. And it would be easy for us to go home and say, isn't that nice? There's Quakers taking action on climate change. And we can't do that. There are people in this room from almost every state in this union. She talked about climate change happening in Africa already. It's happening in the United States already. The media reports to us about droughts without mentioning that they're caused by climate change. The media reports to us about forest fires without reporting that they're caused by climate change. The media reports to us about Hurricane Sandy without telling us how much farther it went because of climate change. We have been in the front of every movement for change in this country, but we're not right now. EQUAT is taking action, and Quaker Earth Care Witness is taking action, and most of our meetings aren't doing anything. We have to look and see that it isn't our grandchildren's future, it isn't our children's future, it's our future. That we have to find the right action for every place we live. And it's not hard, because the coal trains and the oil trains and the pipelines and the banks that finance these things, they're in every state.
As a young person faced with this whole climate crisis thing, I'm really scared. And as Friend just shared, we have stuff going on all over this country that's kind of scary. In fact, we have some things going on not just in Appalachia, in West Virginia, with mountaintop removal, but right in the backyards of this college campus here in California. We have fracking. I'm not exactly sure where it is, but I can just about guarantee that you could drive to a well site in like probably under half an hour from where we are right now. So we got a lot to look at, not just in terms of scary extractive industry, but also in the systemic change that we have to look at as a society with our privilege to actually do something about that. And I'm not just talking about changing light bulbs to LEDs. I'm talking about really looking at how we live our lives on a day-to-day basis. How do we talk about our systems of governance, our systems of making decisions, our systems of using resources on a day-to-day basis, not just as an individual, but as an entire group of people? So we have to look at this, and then we have to look at how do we deal with the carrying capacity of the Earth on a social level, on an international level, altogether. We got a big problem to deal with. But we got teams. Quakers are really, really good at support. We're really, really good at modeling that for so many people. And I have a friend who likes to say, you know, Beyonce gets a lot done. She gets up there, she does some really incredible stuff, she puts on this great concert, but Beyonce has just as many hours in the day as all of us do, 24 in the day, and she does it because she has a team. We have an opportunity to go home to each of our communities and start talking about our vision for a sustainable, healthy, just world that isn't doing all this nasty extractive industry and is also looking at this climate change thing as a whole and start having these conversations. And because we have these opportunities, I have hope, and I'm not so scared anymore. So, I'm excited for what comes next.
Thank you, friends. I'm very, very sorry to end this part. But as Ingrid mentioned, I am a parent, and I remember how excruciating it was when the plenary ran over. But we are still going to have a post-plenary discussion. I'm aware of a number of people who wanted to speak. So anyone who has to go get their kids, you are released. These friends are going to lead us in one song to close here, but there will be a post-plenary discussion in Convocation 5, which is through the bookstore. The topic that I suggest for that is the intersection of our leadings, but really we are open to seeing what is in the room. It feels like there are more friends who have more to say. So Amy Ward-Brimmer will be facilitating that. Feel free to show up early and have conversation with each other, and I will show up there at 9:15 to be part of that conversation. And anyone who wants to join us, come on up.
Courage, dear friends, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home. Courage, dear friends, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home. Courage, dear friends, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home. Courage, dear friends, you do not walk alone. We will walk with you and sing your spirit home. Blessings, friends.
Thank you, singers. Introduce her, close her. Mr. Ceremony.